Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Liquid Digital Marketing Podcast. Today we are talking about Google Analytics and how to use it to improve your results. So we are going to start things off, or we're going to do things a little differently in this episode. So for those of you that don't know, this podcast is obviously in audio and also in video. We record each episode in video, and you can find that on our website or on our YouTube channel. So we're talking about Google Analytics today, and I thought it would be cool to actually share my screen with you so you can kind of have some visuals as well. So if you're listening in on audio, it might be worth going and checking out this podcast on video on our website. However, it's not necessary if you don't want to. You could always go back and listen to it and follow along audio as you go through your own Google Analytics account, or you can just listen to it audio and you're going to get as much information as you need out of this. So I'm going to try to make it as useful in audio and video. First time we're doing this, so bear with me. Hopefully it all goes well. I got some new different technologies set up and the lighting is probably a little different, so bear with me. Anyway, all right, let's talk about Google Analytics. Okay, so first off, what is Google Analytics? Google Analytics is a free tool provided by Google that allows you to track what people are doing on your website. So you can connect your website to Google Analytics and it basically see anything you'd want to know about what your visitors are doing, how they got there, what they're doing once they got there, what actions they're taking. And so you can see everything you could possibly want to know. So it's a great tool for your marketing efforts. But why do you even care, right? Why do you even want to track this data? Well, the most important reason is knowing what works and what doesn't, right? So if you have a website and you're doing any sort of marketing, you need to know whether that's working or whether that's not working. Google Analytics is like your marketing map. It's going to show you what is happening and based off of your efforts, what's working and what's not. It's really a great tool to use to see everything. In order to use Google Analytics, first you got to go to Analytics and sign up and create an account. And then you have to connect it to your website. And I'm not going to go through the steps of connecting it to your website. There's some videos out there. And in fact, I'll create a video and put a link in the show notes where you can go and watch how to connect your site through Google Analytics and how to set up Google Analytics on your site. But for today, what we're going to do is we're going to go through the Google Analytics account and go through the screens, because I think a lot of people go into Google Analytics with high expectations and then quickly get overwhelmed and lost because they don't know exactly what to look for or what things mean. So we're going to do that today. Before we jump in, there is something to mention with Google Analytics. There is basically kind of two versions right now. There's a traditional, which I'll call Google Analytics 3. I don't know if that's what it is, but it's like the traditional original one. And most likely you've probably already, if you've set this up, this is what you have on your site probably. And then there's a new one that's Google Analytics 4 or GA4. So this one is pretty cool. It's just different. It's a lot different than the other one. I'm really more familiar with the other one. I'm still kind of familiarizing myself with GA4. Today we're going to go through the traditional older one that most people probably have set up on their sites if you've had a site for any length of time. And you can still, if you set this up today, you can still use this one, the old one as well. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to share my screen. And I have a Google Analytics account open. Okay, let me just check this out here. Okay, perfect. So yes, so what we have, so basically Google Analytics breaks down into multiple sections. And the first section that you have is the real-time results, or basically it's called real-time. So what this is going to do is it's going to tell you who is on your site right now and in the last 30 minutes, what location they're at in the world, what pages they're on. You can see what content they're consuming. If you have conversions or goals set up, you can see if they're converting on any of these goals. So basically, if you're watching this, you can see on this example that I have pulled up, it has, right now, this site has 5 people visiting, and it gives us a list of all of the pages that people are on and where they're at, and we can kind of click through and learn more about what those are. But that is the real-time results. So that is what you can see in the real time. All right. So there we go. I just kind of click through, and now I can see that there's people in the U.S., and there's now 5 people, one in Charlotte, one in Los Angeles, one in New York. So anyway, okay, so that's real time. The next section that you'll find in Google Analytics is the audience section. So in this section, this is going to tell you the demographics of your visitor, the age and gender. It's going to give you their interest, their location, new versus returning, what browser or devices they're on. And it also has a cool area that's called user flow. And with this, you can basically look at the flow of the user. It's going to map out the user's flow. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and pull it up if you're watching. So if we go to user flow, we can see based off of location, like what pages they started on and then what pages they went to next. And it kind of filters through, and we can see how many people dropped off and how many people went through and which page they went through. So you can kind of really map out their journey. So by default, when you come to the screen, it's going to show you the country. This has the ability where you can change the triggers. So we can actually select social network and say, hey, okay, they came in through social networks, people that came in through Facebook, what path did they take and whatnot. So we can see what they're visiting and what they're not visiting. Okay, so that is a cool tool. The other things you can do is you can look at, like the age, demographic, and then their interest, their location, and we'll get into some of these a little bit more granular here in the next little section here. Okay, and then the next area we have behind audience is acquisition. So acquisition is basically going to give you all of the information about how they got there, how you acquired them. So real time is people on your site right now. Audience is just information about the people that have visited your site. Acquisition is about how they got there. So they organic search, through email, through a referral link, through social. And then the next section after that is behavior. So in the behavior section, this is going to tell you what they did once they got there. So what site content did they consume? How many pages did they view? How long did they stay on that page? What page did they bounce off of? And then we have the last section, which is the conversion section. And this is basically where you can set up and track your goals or e-commerce purchases or downloads or whatever. This requires you to set some things up. So in this, we're not going to necessarily go through the steps of setting up a goal, but it is actually pretty simple to do. Okay, so let's go back to and look at some of the key indicators, right? So we kind of went through an overview of what the different sections are, but what happens is when you get into these sections, you start looking and you're like, well, okay, I see that there's this many people, but like, what does this all mean? Like, how can I take this information and actually use it? Okay, so we're going to go through some things to look at just generally, and then we'll go through some specific use cases, kind of give you some definitions, but let's jump into that. Okay, so before you start going into your data, the biggest mistake people make when they go into Google Analytics is they don't adjust the date range. So up in the top right corner, it's going to by default do the last 7 days. I believe that's what it is. At least for me, it's always the last 7 days. So if you click on these dates, you really need to set a date range, because do you really want to know the data for the last 7 days? Or do you want to know for the last 3 months or the last year? Or did you run a campaign last month and you want to see just how last month performed? I mean, so the date really matters when you're looking at the data. And then also it gives you the ability to compare one date set from another date set. So let's say we want to see how did this month perform versus last month. Or how did this month perform versus this month last year? So we can kind of compare year to year. The other thing when you're thinking about your date ranges and comparing data is you have to think about your business as a whole. Like, is your business seasonal? Or like maybe there is, maybe around like the summer months, you are hopping, that this is your busy time. And in the wintertime is your dead time. So if you compared the 3 summer months compared to the last previous months, which were winter months, of course your data is going to reflect differently, but because of your business and how it operates. Or maybe you have more like sales around November and December because of the holidays and Black Friday. Well, if you compare those 2 months to January and February, you might have drastic changes or drastic results. If you look at from one year to the next, well, maybe there's some different changes that happened in your business from one year to the next that would reflect this data. So it's important to understand the dates you're searching, and then also why you're seeing the data you're seeing outside of just Google Analytics. The other thing to think about when you're selecting your dates is the bigger your range, the more overarching information you're going to get, right? So if I just look at the last week, like how's our social media doing? And I just look at the last week, well, that doesn't really give me a very big window to look at. I can see how it did last week, but what if last week wasn't great, but the previous 3 weeks were fantastic, right? So you really want to open it up. So I usually like to go 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and then do like some comparisons. And that gives you a better window of what things look like. All right, so I'm just going to select the last 30 days, and I'll do a compare to just so we can see data if you're, again, watching this. Okay, so I have this blog pulled up, and we'll just kind of use this as an example. Okay, so if I go into, well, actually, before I jump into any of that, I wanted to talk about the date ranges, but also I want to talk about, before you start looking into your data, you want to come in with knowing what data you need to know. That didn't really come out very good. So a good rule of thumb is to know what your business goals are, right, before looking at your analytics. If your business goals are to list build and grow your list, then you might want to look at some complete and pay attention to different numbers and factors versus if you have an e-commerce store, you are going to want to maybe look at some different things. If you're trying some new things on your social media channels, you're going to come in here and look at some very different things. Like, you don't necessarily need to know what browser people are using to get to your site, but you might want to know what social channel drove the most traffic. So you want to know, it's good to come into Google Analytics with, I want to know this, and then find that data. Because sometimes you have to connect a few things together to know what that data is. That would be my advice. If you come in here and just start like clicking around, you're going to get lost and overwhelmed. I would come in with a plan of, I would like to know these 5 things, and then look and find those 5 things. And you can kind of start to go into the areas, right? So if you want to know how people are getting to your site, if you want to know what people are doing while they're on your site, or if you want to know who they are, you have these 3 different sections to look into. Right? So if you want to know who they are, you're going to go into audience. If you want to know how you got them there, you're going to go into acquisition. If you want to know what they're doing, you're going to go into behavior. Let's move ahead. I'm going to go through the general stats of what are good things to look at and what they mean. Okay, so real time, that is just really, I just kind of use that if I'm like pushing something out there and I just want to see how it responded in the immediate moment. That's great. That's real time though. So we're looking at past data. If I go into audience and I go into then engagement, if I go into audience and then into behavior and then new versus returning, what this is going to tell me is, out of all of my traffic in the date I have selected, the last 30 days, how many people are new and how many people are returning. So if you want to know this, or why this is good to know, is if your depending on your objectives, if you're trying to get new people to your site and grow your audience and build brand awareness, you're going to want to see a lot of new visitors versus returning visitors. If you're trying to get people to come back and purchase, or to come back to your site to consume more and retarget those people that come back, then you're going to want to see more returning. Most likely you're always going to have more new visitors than returning visitors, but it's going to give you a gauge of what that number is. And it's not necessarily you should have this many new visitors versus this many returning visitors. Probably what it more is this month we had X number of new visitors, and last month we had X number of visitors. So did we go up or did we go down, right? So you're not necessarily comparing all of the data all the time. You're kind of comparing it from time frame to time frame because you're basing it off of your business objective. Okay. So that is, and I'm kind of looking at my notes here, so sorry if I'm kind of like jumping back and forth. Okay, so now under audience behavior, there is engagement. Okay, so the engagement is going to tell you how engaged your audience is. So once they're there, like how much are they consuming? How long are they staying on your site? So you kind of have these two tabs here. You have the duration and then you have the depth, or the page depth. Basically what the duration is going to tell you is it's going to give you a time frame. So 1 to 10 seconds you had, or this person had, 13,280 visits or sessions. People that stayed from 11 to 30 seconds, there was 150. People that stayed, so there's a huge drop off right there, right? So the site has a huge bounce rate. People that stayed 30 seconds to a minute, there were 188 sessions in this time frame. So you can kind of see how long people are staying. Interestingly enough, there is, once we kind of get to the minute plus, the numbers start to go back up. So usually people are either hitting the site and bouncing off, which is going to be mostly the case with a lot of times because, that just happens. And then people are going to be there longer than a minute. That's great. You want people on your site, for longer than that 30 seconds, so having people there for a minute, seeing those numbers increase is good. Okay, so that's going to give you some indication of, how engaged are people on your site. Okay, the next tab is page depth. This is how many pages did they look at per session. So people looking at one page is always going to be the highest number, right? You're going to in this case there was 13,000 sessions that saw one page and then left. And then there was 1,060 sessions that saw 2 pages, or visited 2 pages, I should say. And then there was 318 that visited 3 pages. So this report's going to give you that ability to see how many pages they're consuming, and you can kind of get an idea of how people are behaving on your site. Okay, also an audience, another cool thing to look at is if we go into, let me find it here, into the mobile, so audience mobile, and go to overview, it's going to tell us what devices people are consuming the site with. So are they on desktop, mobile, or tablet? So the results here might surprise you, actually. Most of the time it's going to be mobile, but in this case it's desktop. So this is going to tell you, are people consuming your site on mobile or desktop? And that really matters if you making sure that your site is mobile optimized. So if people are visiting these pages on mobile, how are they performing and how do they look and what is that experience to them? Because if the majority of your traffic is on mobile, you really want to focus on your mobile. If a small portion is on mobile, then maybe it's not as big of a concern. Let's move into acquisition. So if we go into acquisition, what I like to look at here is just the acquisition overview. This is really going to give you a good idea of where your traffic is coming from. So what you're going to have is it's going to list out basically toward the bottom of the page a list of where people are coming from. So what you have is organic search, direct. Direct means people that click that just basically directly got there, right? Or it can be a placeholder for analytics. If it doesn't exactly know where they came from, a lot of times it goes into direct. So direct is just people just going to the site. Maybe they have it saved in a shortcut or a bookmark. Sometimes referral links get logged as direct, but that's what it is. Referral traffic is basically a link to your site. So if someone has your site linked on their website and they're linking to it, that is going to be referral traffic. Social traffic is basically traffic from any social channel. In this case, they have other in theirs that's listed. We'll ignore that one because we don't know what that is. Email, obviously, any links that are coming from email. If you're running any email campaigns, how many people visited your site via email. And then there's paid search. So if you're doing any paid advertising, how many people got there through your paid search. So that is a great way to see how they got there. Now, once you are in this screen, if you click on one of these, so if I go to... I'm just going to click on social. Once I do, it's going to bring me up a screen and it's going to break down all the different social channels. So Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, WeChat, Reddit. So all of these different channels. And then it's going to give me stats. How many people came from them? How many pages did they consume? How long did they stay on the pages? And I can see all of this data for the time period I've selected. So that's a great way to see different stuff there. Okay, so if we are looking at these, what else we can see is how they got there, but then we can see, like I said, how many pages they consumed, how long they stayed on those pages, and then also the bounce rate. So the bounce rate is basically when someone comes to a page and then leaves right away. So that's what they consider a bounce. So basically the lower the number, the better. You want a lower bounce rate. So if, 80%, if your bounce rate is 80%, then that means 80% of your traffic, it was considered a bounce. They came to the site, were there for like a second and left, or second or maybe two and left. I don't know what the exact time frame is, but it's, pretty quick. Okay, so let's go into, the next spot we have under acquisition, so how people are still getting to the site. What I like to do here is go into campaigns. So if you're doing marketing, there is this thing called the UTM parameter. And you can go to this UTM parameter and create UTM by, I'm just going to go to it if you're watching. It's called, if you just Google UTM Builder, whoops. Okay, you Google UTM Builder. It's basically going to allow you to put in a link and then give a campaign ID, a campaign source, a campaign medium, and a campaign name, and it's going to give you a link. So if you use this link out there, what it's going to do is allow analytics to track these variables that you put in there. So if we put in this, like Facebook, social pay-per-click post, and traffic is clicking on that, then it'll show up in our campaign. Also, if you're using things like MailChimp and different newsletter systems, they will automatically add in their own parameters that you can track. That when you come in here, you'll see, oh, hey, I sent out this email from MailChimp and now I have this, traffic from this newsletter. So it'll automatically create campaigns for you. So you can kind of see what initiatives you're taking and what they're doing for you. So that is the other area that I come to frequently. Also in acquisition is social. If you come into social and go to the overview, it's basically just going to give you an overview similar to kind of like the overview page we were on. It's a little different, but it's going to break down the different social platforms and the traffic that came through those. Okay, let's jump into behavior. So again, behavior is what happens when people are on your website. Okay, so in behavior, if you go into the behavior, site content, all pages, what this is going to do is it's going to list out the top pages that have been visited on your site in that time frame. So it's going to tell you also the performance of that page. So let's say you have a blog, such as the example we're looking at. They have this one blog post that has, the most visits, and we can see that, it has like 700 page views. It's got an average of 4 minutes of time on that page, which is great. It does have a bounce rate of 91%, meaning 91% of the traffic that got there bounced off. But at 700 visits, that's good. And then it gives us the exit. So 80% of the people exited here. So they came to this page and then they left the site. They didn't go to another page. So usually what you'll find in this is your homepage will be at the top. But in this case, it's not. It's one of their blog posts. So that's a good thing to know, what pages are working and what pages aren't. And then inside of behavior, we also have, where did it go? Behavior flow. There it is. Okay, so we have behavior flow, very similar to user flow, but basically this is going to give you more of like a page view. So if they came, it's going to default by which landing page. So they came into the home page, what page did they go to next? After that page, which ones did they go to? So you can kind of see, and you can isolate these flows and just see which traffic went through which pages. Yeah, so very cool. Very, very good to see all that information. Okay, so let's go down to the next area, which is conversions. So basically what this is going to be any goals you set up, or if you have an e-commerce site, if you've connected that and turned on e-commerce, then it's going to track all of that information. So let's see if there's any on this one. I guess that's fine. There isn't, unfortunately, but that's okay. So what a goal is basically you set up a rule that says, for example, let's say you have a download on your site. They fill out a form. After they fill out that form, they get redirected to a thank you page. So what we could do with a goal is set it up to where once they hit that thank you page, then we know that they've converted. So we're basically tracking all of the traffic to that thank you page and counting it as a download conversion or goal. Now what's going to happen as traffic starts happening and going through our site, and then they fill out that form, and then they go and they achieve that goal that we set, it's going to count as a conversion. So now we can see this, or it's going to count as a conversion. So now we can see what goals are converting and like where the traffic is coming from. So now we can see like, okay, if we're posting this out there, like, are they coming from our paid traffic? Are they coming from social? Did it come from a newsletter? How are people getting to our free download? Now we can tell because we set up a goal. So we can see when that conversion happens. For example, let me go into a different one. Okay, so yeah, if you're listening in, I know this might be a little weird because you're like, well, I can't see what the heck you're doing. But, okay. So I'm going to go into this goals overview. So let's say we have a goal up here, all of our goals. Let's say it's a downloaded a resource. All right, so we had, let's say, 148 people download this resource in this period of time. But what I can do is actually, I can go into our acquisition and go into our overview and then I can see which traffic source had the most conversions. So that's super cool. Like, so if I look in this last column here at the very end, this conversion column, I can see how many conversions there were, and so that's super helpful. So now I can see, okay, did this conversion what did it come from? Let me go into here, and usually I would have this maybe a little bit better dialed in, but I'm kind of figuring this out as I go here. Okay, download resource, there we go. Yeah. So anyway, once you set up your goals, that's how you would be able, you can track them and see what's happening on the site. The other cool thing is it has this e-com conversions or e-commerce. It's going to give you an overview. Now this site isn't hooked up to e-commerce, so there's not going to be any data, but it'll tell you how much revenue you've generated, the transactions, and really so much of stuff. You can see the checkout behavior, where people are falling off, and all kinds of stuff. Okay, I have one more section to go through, and we're going to talk about some use cases here. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is, so let's talk about some typical ones. If we are talking about, let's say, list building, what you're going to want to do is set up a goal to track your downloads via a thank you page. And I'm going to just do this real quick, just so you can kind of see. If I go into the little gear down at the very left bottom corner and then go to my goals, I'll just click on one of these. You can basically set up the details when they go to a certain page that it's going to count as a goal. And then you can verify it, make sure it works. Okay, so there you go. So that's how you would do it. So now that goal is set. So once you've set that goal, let me get back to the home here. Okay, once you've set that goal up, then what you can do is you can see where all of your traffic is coming from that accomplished that goal. And then also what they are downloading. You can also track the performance of your email newsletters with the campaigns and e-commerce like we were just talking. So basically you can see which emails, if you're sending out, like, let's say a monthly email, you can see which ones are performing better. So like you can say, okay, this content people are responding to, I'm getting more, action on the website versus, this one. So you can kind of see which newsletters are working best. And the best place to see that is in the acquisition campaigns area. So then you can see, okay, out of all of our campaigns, these are the ones that are performing the best and where they're coming from. And then if it's an e-commerce, if you're sending out, let's say, products or something, you can see, okay, this is, what is, what products are getting purchased and whatnot. So if you go into the e-commerce overview area, and unfortunately this one doesn't have it, but yes. So the other cool thing is, and I already kind of talked about this a little bit, but you can see the cart behavior. In fact, let me go to see if I can find one that has, I don't know, I think this one, let's see. Yes, okay, so we can see shopping behavior. So we can see that in this screen, we can see that 27% that visited the site didn't have any shopping activity, meaning they didn't add anything to the cart or anything. 54% got to the, added to the cart. 18% abandoned their cart. 2.6% abandoned the checkout. So they got to the checkout and just didn't finish. So you can kind of see like where people are at or falling off in your store. So that's kind of a cool stat there. Yes. So, and then the other kind of use case is knowing what social platforms are working, right? So I think as business owners, we put a lot of effort and energy into our social platforms, and sometimes it feels like, it's not working, or we don't know, if it's really, where traffic's coming from. So basically, if you go into that acquisition, social, and then the overview tab, it's going to tell you how much traffic you're getting from the different platforms. And it's really a good indication, because a lot of times I think people, and I know we do this as well, will put in energy into a platform and you may not think that it's working, but if you look at the analytics and you're getting traffic from it, then Another way we use it is we are in some different directories for our industry, and those drive traffic and actually leads. So what I can do is, and we have to pay to be in these directories. So what I can do is I can see how many leads we're getting from these places, and is it worth it? Is it worth spending money into these places to get leads? Same with social. Is it working? Is energy you're putting into this platform, is it working? So should you continue or should you change it? So this is going to tell you, it's your map to understanding what's working and what's not. Okay, so that is Google Analytics in a nutshell. Hopefully that was helpful. I know that was a little different from what we usually do. I'll be curious to see your guys' response. If you like that format, let me know and we can, slide some more of those in there. I think mostly we'll keep it, to where it's, more audio and not needing to be visual. But however, there are some times where, like when it comes to Google Analytics, like you can only talk about it so much without actually seeing it. And I'm sure listening to it is only so much fun. So hopefully I've made it a little bit of fun and helpful. So when you go in to your Google Analytics account, you can at least pull this up and maybe follow along and pull out some of the nuggets, hopefully, that you got out of this episode. And, if you have any questions, let us know. Be sure to check this episode out on our website where you'll find the video. You'll also find links to other resources. If you found this helpful, please share it and subscribe. And we'll see you in the next episode.